Now, on page 131 and 134, there is also a section in section 5 that talks about frequently asked questions. And I encourage you that if you think you have any questions, to go to this section, because you might be surprised that some of them are some of the same questions you have in your mind already. So feel free to read that and find out if there are some questions that could be answered for you. A very, very important section is found in section 5 on page 135 and 136. In this section, you will see that there's details of the phase-in process of working with your student teacher. Phasing in has a lot of variables. For example, we are looking at the readiness of the cooperating teacher to give up their classroom and the readiness of the student teacher. Sometimes that involves the confidence level of the student teacher, could have something to do with the experience working with young people. There's also might be a time to phase in a student teacher in a transition of units. So talk to your student teacher about the possibility of when you would like to phase your student teacher in. In most instances, use your professional judgment when having a student teacher engage in this teaching phase. On page 138 of the Student Teaching Handbook, this is where the cooperating teacher and the student teacher will discuss long-range plans of when to phase in. So you can talk about what you'll do during week 1, week 2, and so forth. There are 3 phases to the teaching. 1 is observation, 2 is participation, 3 is teaching. During the observation phase, the student teacher is trying to understand the classroom processes, protocols, those kinds of things. They're getting to know the students, the names of the students. They're working on understanding the classroom management strategies that you are using to model in your classroom and teaching strategies. They're also trying to figure out the technology that is being used in the school. The student teacher should be actively involved at this student teaching phase, so they shouldn't be sitting in the back of the classroom not being involved. And I encourage you to review the interaction matrix so that you can kind of see how to get your student teacher involved. Phase 2, that participation area, is where the student teacher is assisting with the planning of lessons, kind of doing the behind-the-scenes work, developing relationships with students, and they possibly could teach intro part of a lesson or the culminating part of a lesson. They can teach mini lessons, or they can teach a period after the cooperating teacher has modeled the lesson in the previous period. And again, the interactions matrix would be very helpful for you to look at. The 3rd phase is teaching. And there are distinct differences between the first placement and the second placement, simply because the student teacher has gained lots of confidence and experience in that first placement. Excuse me, they might be willing to take over the classroom a little bit earlier in that second placement. So they might be getting a little bit more teaching experience in that second placement. But again, here they're teaching mini lessons. They could be co-teaching, team teaching. We want them to have a minimum of 2 weeks of full-time teaching or more. More would be better too. And this is where they're teaching full units and full lessons. Now the student teacher during that first week is going to be working on an observation form that can be found on page 137 of the handbook. And they're simply just watching a group of students, a class, and they are going to be answering the questions that are on page 137 of the handbook. There will also be some formal observations done by your university coordinator. These will all be scheduled in advance, and I will be taking observation notes and filling out a lesson feedback form, which will be sent to the student teacher and the cooperating teacher electronically. The cooperating teacher should also be observing lessons on a regular basis and provide feedback to the student teacher whenever possible. And yes, the student teachers are required to write daily lesson plans. The Student Teaching Handbook on page 140 and page 141 will give you some ideas on what the expectations are for lesson plans. And there are many, many ways to write a lesson plan. You might even have some great ideas on how students can write their lesson plans. I want them to be very practical to use in the classroom. So some of these lesson plans will have, something like the subject, grade level, maybe the name of the teacher and the date. They will have objectives, goals, and or standards. Then I would like them to put down the materials used just for organization purposes, and maybe list the technology that will be used during the lesson plan. And then the meat of the lesson are the activities that are going to be discussed during the lesson, maybe the procedures or process of how they're going to teach that. And finally, we want somewhat of a closure, review, or an evaluation process at the end. And certainly if they use some good resources and references, we'd like them to list those on there too. When I come in to observe your student teacher, please provide me with a place to sit in the classroom. And the student teacher should have a lesson plan printed for me during that lesson, or they can certainly email them to me ahead of time. And that they can usually put those in the place that you would like me to sit. I like to sit in the most least, distracting place of your classroom, so that I'm not interrupting the lesson. And please note that any lesson is an acceptable lesson for a visit, except if the students are testing the whole entire time, there is a video playing the entire period, or there's a scheduled field trip. But any other lesson is wonderful for me to watch and to observe and to learn. Following each lesson, I would like to do a debriefing after the observation. And basically what goes on in that debriefing session is I will be telling the students a little bit about the notes that I've taken. And these are, again, the ones that I will email to the CT and to the student teacher. So we will be talking about the things that went well during the lesson, and we will also talk about the things to think about. We will discuss goals for future planning and delivering of lessons. We will discuss the lesson feedback form, which I will show you in just a second, and we'll answer any other questions or concerns with the student teacher or with the student teaching experience with the CT or with the student teacher. Please allow some time after these observed lessons to debrief with the student teacher. Sometimes it takes anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes. Also, please feel free to talk to your UNI coordinator at any time during these visits. We appreciate your communication. Here's an example of the lesson feedback form. It talks about the introductory set, the lesson design, the content knowledge, management, assessment, student engagement, the effective domain, response to the unanticipated, and the closure. So I will be rating them whether or not it was effective, partially effective, or not effective. And so you will get a copy of this form as well. The cooperating teacher will have a copy of this so that you can use it when you observe future lessons. Now, in order to schedule a visit, there's a little process involved. The student teacher during that first week will be looking at the schedule that they will be working with during their participation. And this will be provided to the UNI coordinator via email. And they will also be listing important dates from their school calendar when their school is not in session. I know that with different weather situations, some schools may be starting later or getting out early, and in this case, I would ask the student teacher to, call me the night before if they know, or to email or call me when they know of these delays. On page 138 and 139, you will see that there are some examples of how to write the scheduling out. The UNI coordinator will announce what date she is coming so that you will know exactly what the dates are. The student teacher will email the UNI coordinator 3 choices of times for the visit. So sit down with the student teacher and the cooperating teacher. The two of you will sit down and talk about some good times for an observation. And of course, we want to choose the time frames or the periods that you are taking over if you haven't taken over a full schedule yet. The UNI coordinator will look at all of the student teacher schedules that she will be visiting on those particular days and select the date or the time frame that will work best for the observation with all the students that will be seen on that particular day. I ask that you please be flexible with your dates and times. There's a lot of long distance traveling, and in Iowa we can have some very tricky travel days, but I will always communicate via cell phone if I'm going to be over 10 minutes late for any reason. Finally, when all of this experience is over, we want to welcome our new colleagues. You're going to see a transformation happen throughout the semester. They will be going from student to colleague, and we really want them to do a great job during the semester, and we certainly appreciate your time. Enjoy this experience, have a great semester, and thank you so much for your time.